This will be the most accurate and up-to-date ranking of every major Baki fighter from weakest to strongest, a manga that is ongoing with main characters getting progressively stronger throughout the series, continuing this trend for over 30 years and featuring numerous canon side manga with crazy feats and warriors to break down. Therefore, this is the E tier. These guys with Iron Mike, the depiction of Mike Tyson in the Baki world, being pretty much a representation of peak regular humans, you can say, and actually had a wild fight with Shiba during the maximum tournament. Then you can place in all the Yasha 8s we've seen, representing what a 13-year-old Baki was already able to overcome, and brings us well into the superhuman aspects of Baki. Then General Stridum, a very interesting character who's been around since the very start, highlighted as far superior to regular martial artists, alongside being insanely experienced in warfare, top tier knowledge, and even respected by the ogre, who's actually required to fight on occasion. Then Mouth, who I will consider as one entity based on their character, defeated Iron Mike and somewhat pressured Che Guevara. But next is Mount Toba, who was one of the first threatening antagonists and pressured pre-maximum tournament Baki, who was 17 at the time, and then lost of course, likewise against Retsu in that later tournament. Not appearing for over 20 years from my knowledge, but funny enough, a character known as Hanada has recently returned to the current Baki Rahen manga, someone who was off-screen by Mount Toba during the early days of Baki, so perhaps his return will occur shortly. Next is Agari, another pro wrestler who had that legendary draw with Mount Toba, but during the maximum tournament, you could say he did much better, defeating the sumo dude who actually clapped Motobe in that arc, and then lost in the quarterfinals against Baki himself, being the definition of a goon and the dirty tactics, with some very strange appearances since then, but always an ultimate goon. Following the pro wrestlers, we have the main karate students of Doppo, Kato and Sendo, who more often than not take L's throughout the series, but do have decent fights at times and should still be training under Katsumi to this day, but we haven't gotten anything new from them in many years. Then we have the mysterious bodyguard Yu Amai, the very capable fighter who Yujiro actually brought to the maximum tournament, who did decently well against Dopporochi, but wasn't really worthy of that fight or at that caliber, and raging getting clapped from the ogre to the utmost degree due to this, but should technically be alive still, so some type of return would be cool, but I doubt it. And the final fighter in E tier is Alexander Garland, who had that wild fight with Jack Hanma, one-shot Hanayama, and wielded next level aura when he pulled up on the maximum tournament. Unfortunately, he was later defeated by Sikorsky as well. That was at the start of the Death Row Inmates arc, and hasn't done anything since, at least outside of the goofy comedy manga featuring Gaia and Sikorsky, where Garland also makes an appearance various times. Now up next is D tier, which begins with Kaio Ryu, the master of Retsu, who famously got destroyed by Yujiro like many others, making it somewhat hard to gauge his true strength. So you could say view him as a placeholder for most of the Kaios for now, with this dude next to him as well, the Japanese shake my hand legend, who sneaks his way into various aspects of Baki somehow, with bro having a goated fight with Retsu during that tournament. So you honestly just need to give him your respect. Then we have Dr. Kureha Shinogi, a very prominent character since the early days of Baki. Even Yujiro had interest in him during his introduction, and you could say Baki's fight with him was a major point in the story. Since then, he's been the doctor of Jack, reappearing various times, but after losing to his brother in the maximum tournament, he seems to have taken a step back from fighting, remaining as the Baki story's doctor for the most part. But his insane knowledge and importance to the story and early series glaze needs to be mentioned, so he likely sits around here. This is where I'll now place the death row inmates. My ranking for them has somewhat adjusted over the years. This is mostly due to Yanagi's showings and importance in the side manga Urenchi, but Sikorsky and Doyle being below as the weakest prisoners is agreed on by most. Spec is an interesting case and could very well be the strongest in the group. This really depends on how you argue Hanayama's strength and his rate of growth since that arc. While for Dorian, he was an absolute monster and pretty much had the best performance within that arc itself, while being the only one to make it to the next arc regardless of the somewhat interesting circumstances. While Yanagi, you can say he's the most dangerous and got the honor of being slayed by Yudro and Motobe as well, but unfortunately they still have not officially returned to the main Baki manga. We have the Revenge Tokyo episode on Netflix, which seems to have confused many people, likewise with them appearing at the end of the Kengan vs Baki crossover film. The truth is, this episode came from a one-shot side manga that Itagaki, the creator of Baki, made when Netflix first started adapting Baki on Netflix, the start of the Death Row Inmates arc, and this was for the sole purpose of promoting the anime. One chapter for each of the prisoners to give an update on them for the manga readers in Japan, something that sadly and unfortunately is 99% not going to continue or get an update for. But something to mention is that the legend Sonoda, the main police guy throughout that arc, has recently made his return in the current Baki Rahen manga, so perhaps they will be returning. Anything is really possible. Now, the final three in D tier are characters that have only appeared in side manga. We have Rex and the Grandmaster from Hanayama's Scarface Gaiden. Interesting characters that are quite hard to scale, and many questions in regards to the canon nature to the broader Baki story. But when looking at the timeline, Scarface was releasing from 2007 to 2009, so compared to what was going on in the main manga, it was around the first half of the Pickle arc, meaning based on Hanayama's ranking at that time, you can range them around here, above the prisoners for an example, by getting outclassed by most others due to the progression of time and every character getting stronger. But when it comes to the Scarface manga itself, it's seemingly unfinished. Some sources state that it's ongoing and others that it's cancelled. Since it hasn't released anything new since 2009, you can assume we're not getting anything else new, so this is where they go. And then we have Mumon from the Urenchi side manga, the top of D tier, and this is mostly due to it taking place in the past timeline wise, before the main events of the Baki series, when our protagonist was around 17 and 18 and whatever his age is now, probably around 19. Where the narrative of this ongoing side manga is the first and original defeat of Yanagi, you could say. And since this guy Mumon is Katsumi's brother, his potential is definitely off the charts and has demonstrated quite overpowered abilities already. So this is probably the best place to range him, with the possibility to go higher as that manga could reveal more insanity as well. Therefore, I highly recommend checking it out. It may be the best side manga in the Baki universe, with characters like Hozue's father making an appearance, with him being an absolute Chad, and many more interesting things I've gone over in other videos. Now this brings us to the C tier. Ali Jr. is last, as his rise in the manga began during the Rattai tournament right after the Prisoner arc, having the feat of defeating Doppo and Goki before his ultimate downfall, but more importantly, being one of the only characters to actually humiliate Yujiro Hanma. But since his arc, he has not appeared again, or really even mentioned as well. Funny enough though, some people have theorized that he did actually steal Baki's girlfriend from him, as she has yet to appear since the father-son fight, which for reference concluded in 2012 when it comes to the manga. But ranking Ali Jr. above the prisoners is clear based on the power progression and the unclear nature of the side manga characters. Then we have Che Guevara, a go-to character, but similar to Ali Jr., has not appeared since his arc, and likely won't again. Additionally, since his only top tier fight was against Oliver in 2008, and the wacky nature of that fight as well makes it impossible to rank him higher, but I think most people can agree that he's at the very least above the prisoners, and maybe even Ali Jr. due to the potential timeline in Baki, as the Oliver prison arc takes place right after the Ali Jr. arc, with Baki going through further imagination training, and Che Guevara being set up as a monster even by Baki's view at that point. Now the next two connect to quite new showings in Shiba's official and ongoing side manga, where Ron and the Mad Lad himself have a crazy fight, but the scaling chain and reasoning for them ranking this high mostly connects to Shiba's performance against Baki prior to the father-son fight, where yes, he got beat up to an insane degree in every exchange with the Hanma. However, bro did quite well, and honestly better than anyone lower on the list did do or would have done against Baki at that point. And alongside his side manga taking place after that as well, you have to give him some respect. And then Ron's performance in their fight was quite insane, showing how much stronger he's gotten as well, and worthiness of a placement like this. Some may view it as controversial, but even back in the day, Ron was viewed as one of the strongest Kaio introduced during that tournament as well, and has maintained pretty much all aura regardless of him being defeated in the fights we've seen. Then we have the recently introduced sumo boy Keiha, who yes, was quite the bozo and got absolutely destroyed by Doppo to an insane degree. However, Doppo at the current day in the story is the strongest he's ever been, as I've explained extensively in previous videos. Showing wise, we didn't get much. His interaction with Yujiro definitely portrayed him as much stronger than a lot of people would have assumed. However, with the lacking of fights and overall narrative what we expected alongside Sukune, he can't go any higher than this, and if you wanted to rank him lower, you very well could. But following that, we have Kosho the Cord Cutter, someone who had a massive upgrade in the recent Baki Rahen manga, doing very well in a sparring match against Doppo Orochi, then of course having the chance to face current Jack Hanma, where he was able to land a few shots and actually blind Jack during that battle. However, all things considered, he didn't stand a chance and got destroyed by the biting cyborg, but his evolution and power from the early days was definitely highlighted, but due to him being one of the first people to face current Jack out of the roster, his placement is probably going to be overtaken by most of them, and that's why the final fight I have in C tier is Gaia. So narratively speaking, I think most people in the fandom would agree that Gaia would have been presented as stronger than Kosho, and since Gaia has directly been called out by Jack as well, and hasn't fought him thus far in the arc, he will be fighting him later on, and that could be pretty interesting considering they had somewhat a friendly dynamic during the Most Evil Death Row Inmates arc, where they tag team destroyed Sikorsky, or Jack of course tapped Gaia in as well. But in more recent days outside of his goofy side manga, Gaia has just been presented as motor-based student and is kind of being shit on in many regards, so I'm not expecting that much from him. But this brings us to the B tier, where we're starting to get into the top tiers of the Baki world and most relevant fighters, with a lot of the placements being interchangeable throughout. But up first in the B tier is Retsu Kaio and Kaku Kaio, two characters who are around the same by the end of Retsu's role in the story. For example, during his battle with Masashi Miyamoto, you could in fact argue that Retsu had surpassed the Grandmaster, but you cannot definitively prove that. and since Rensu is now dead and Kaku could very well fight again in the future, I will be placing the old man one spot above him. And to those of you who keep asking about my ranking for Isekai Retsu, based on his showing so far in that manga, it's safe to say he's the peak of the Baki universe or around Yujiro level, with him having some absolutely wild feats and showings thus far. Bro has literally become one of those overpowered isekai protagonists at this point. Following that, we have Doppo Orochi and Goki, two characters who had a direct comparison to Kakukaro in the Ali Jr. arc, providing the narrative from that point there that they're likely around the same tier, and you could say due to the involvement and multiple fights Goki and Doppo have post that, alongside implied and demonstrated training outright, they have indeed surpassed the caliber of Kaku. But when it comes to ranking these two, most people in the fandom agree that you rank Goki one place higher due to him defeating Doppo back in the day during the Maximum tournament. However, with that said, you could say Doppo's stocks are currently higher due to having a better performance and more relevance in the current story. Both of them will end up fighting Jack during the current arc, and both are widely respected and relevant in the series to this day. Then we have Katsumi, who narratively speaking should have surpassed all of these masters. Him being above Doppo Orochi is clear, the new face of Japanese karate. And now with him combining Retsu's arm, the Chinese Kempo side, with his own, an evolution and investment requirement for Katsumi is definitely there right now. I do believe his fight against Jack is going to be one of the closest and most wild we get throughout, and will definitively prove that he's above guys like Goki and Kaku. Then the last guy I have in B tier is Sukune. This may be controversial for some, but people need to remember that his arc is 100% over, and I really doubt he's going to return, and if he does, it won't be anytime soon. I'm guessing within the next 10 years of Baki's manga's release. He was defeated by all three Hanmas and defeated by Biscuit Oliver in the rematch. And I do believe many of these guys in B tier, who once they get the chance to face Jack, will indeed be stronger than Sukune, particularly when you compare their performance against now a stronger Jack than the one that defeated the Sumo Boy. Now when it comes to the A tier, we are getting to the true top tiers of the Baki world, or you could say the top 10 rough strongest characters of all time. At the bottom right now is Biscuit Oliver. A lot of people love to compare and complain about him defeating Sukune, particularly with the Sumo Boy still being injured. Yes, I do agree that is a factor, but Oliver, while locked in a fight like that, using his overpowered techniques such as the ball, highlights as being many times stronger and more powerful as a whole compared to someone like Sukune. And while he's one of the few characters that hasn't been called out by Jack, I do believe he is going to face him and the fight's going to be quite wild. Oliver, during his introduction, was like a top 3 strongest characters of all time. Since then, his stocks have gone down quite a bit. However, at the current point, they're on the rise, and right now he should be the strongest he's ever been. Then we have Motobe, who had that wild performance in the Masashi Miyamoto arc, defeating Jack and Masashi himself with the use of prep time. However, without weapons and those aspects, you can't really rank Motobe in A tier. He's probably around the B tier group, but with that he could potentially be S tier. So for now, take and minus those aspects, he sits around A tier, with his rematch against Jack being a definitive way to properly rank him in the future. Then we have a controversial placement to some who are, I guess, fairly uninformed about the current Baki events. We have Pickle, who yes is still in the top 10 strongest of all time, but may be done with fighting in the Baki story. His recent fight against Jack highlighted that Pickle doesn't have the same demeanor and isn't who he was back in the day, at least compared to the true top tiers of the Baki world. Yes, he would probably destroy anyone else low on this list, but compared to the Hanmas and other certain characters, Pickle will probably be ranking lower and lower as time goes on, and that's just the reality of what's going on. Then the last fighter we have in A tier is Hanayama, who currently is fighting Jack at the release of today's video, and already has performed many times better than the likes of Pickle, leading to why he's ranked one place higher. He's a character similar to Yujiro in the sense he naturally grows stronger. He may not train, he may not use various overpowered martial arts, but he is the definition of built different, and as some of you fellow Baki fans have been claiming, he's pretty much a gatekeeper of the S tier now, and when he wants to will perform insanely well against those stronger than him. That's why he's on the same tier as someone like Pickle, and right now ranked above him. Now we have the S tier, which begins with Yuichiro Hanma, a true legend that we all require more information about. Therefore, here is a breakdown of everything we currently know about this beast. During World War II, he was on this island fighting the American military on his own, forcing them to use over 1,000 tons of ammunition, including bombings from the sky and these various boats, which you see here, there is an insane amount of them, failing to stop this monster, or for what we see, even damage him, forcing the American military to consider the use of a nuke on a single person in Japan. Here is the entire story and everything you need to know about Yuichiro Hanma from Baki. He appeared after both Yujiro and Baki revealed their demon backs in their wild fight. The ogre, like everyone else, was left stunned by his ghost-like appearance. Have we ever seen Yujiro make a face like this? He proceeds to question his father about why he's here. The anime makes it seem like Yujiro is more so scared, while the manga more so enraged. This is due to the intensity of the speech bubbles here. However, what Yuichiro states remains the same. He is both surprised and saddened that Yujiro is struggling in this fight, or as the manga states, fighting against a child, yet you still have so much trouble, which for a change is someone actually talking shit to Yujiro rather than the other way around. This is pretty much the narrative based reasoning for Yuichiro being the strongest, but context about him as a character is very important to consider. Mainly him being the exact opposite of Yujiro in every way, and the father-son relationship the Hanma family seems to have. When it comes to feats and showings, he was on this small island that was hit with over 1,000 tons of ammunition. This includes bombings from the sky and sea, showing no damage sustained at all, and him destroying the American military, attacking them with one technique, that being dress, using their bodies as a weapon to just chuck them around like bullets, destroying them all, then continuing to attack the boat with his demon back activated, resulting in such immense fear from the entire crew that they jumped overboard. Unfortunately, some of this was actually cut from the anime, mainly him throwing the bodies around and taking them out. Regardless, without a doubt, this is one of the most impressive feats throughout the entire Buckyverse. Take note, a nuke was never dropped. They almost did, however, meaning Yuichiro was such a threat they considered even nuking him. When it comes to the technique that he used, that is something Yujiro even has respect for, claiming that it was really strong, or something that he's proud of, so much so that he wanted to test it out and pretty much show Baki what it was. However, all this is good, but there is one thing that may put Yuichiro down quite a bit. In Doppo Orochi's side manga, we see him encounter the demon and land a kick. This actually results in Yuichiro to claim he broke his jaw with this kick. Of course, this is a much younger and weaker Doppo compared to the main series. This is proven by the spin-off itself and various material in the main manga that I covered in this video. But the purpose of this scene was mainly to highlight that even though Yuichiro doesn't like to show it, but he's glad that there's some people out there who know how strong he really is and what he's truly capable of. So with all that said, I think it's safe to say he belongs in the S tier, but I cannot rank him any higher due to that as well. Then we have Jack Hanma, the guy who is the protagonist of the current Baki arc. He's going to pretty much fight everyone from C, B and A tier alongside some other guys I'll talk about shortly. He will end up facing Baki and Yujiro Hanma. This is pretty much his training arc to be ready to face those two, and when he does, I do believe he's going to be ready. That's why he's definitively in S tier. He's already defeated people like Sukune and Pickle. He's likely going to defeat Hanayama, my not so bold but clear prediction in the upcoming manga, so certified S tier. Then we have Masashi Miyamoto, the only character to really draw the ogre in a fight. Yes, it was cut short, but by the end of the fight, Masashi was about to land a wild attack and may have actually damaged the ogre quite severely. He's a monster unlike any other, changed the Baki story unlike any other, and if he was to return, I think he would maintain top tier status without a doubt. Even though I don't believe that is exactly going to happen, it is set up as a possibility directly in his arc. Then we have Baki Hanma, our overall protagonist who has pretty much completed his story now, existing as an overpowered entity similar to his father. Throughout the Suma arc, he's been demonstrated as an absolute monster, defeating Sukune in like 5 seconds, having a wild fight against Masashi Miyamoto, of course gaining respect of his father and being recognized as a fellow strongest creature alive, something which is actually Jack Hanma's ultimate goal since he was a kid. And then the peak of the story, still to this day and from the very beginning, Yujiro Hanma. If you've read or watched the Baki and Yujiro fight, you cannot rank Baki above his father still. If you think Yujiro Hanma is stronger than the ogre, you're wrong and uninformed or misinformed, you could say. Masashi Miyamoto had that crazy draw, but based on what we got in that fight, Yujiro had a better performance as a whole and was technically winning all things considered. Therefore, the ogre is the solidified number 1. Now before you leave, see this playlist on the screen right now? That features close to 300 Baki videos I've uploaded over the years. Check it out, and of course subscribe here on Mysterious Weeb for even more greatness.